All right, guys, I have Georgia's state deer biologist Charlie Killmaster on here with me to talk a little bit about the upcoming Georgia deer season, some harvest trends, and as well as some deer disease issues. Yeah, Charlie, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. We're just as we record this, we're just a couple days out from the Georgia deer season, so I'm definitely excited for that and ready to start spending a little time in the tree and which probably means your workload's gonna increase here in the coming months. But yeah, that's why I just wanted to get you on here ahead of that to talk a little bit about the upcoming season. And yeah, I guess if you wouldn't mind, just start us off with what changes are in store for Georgia deer hunters for this 2023 2024 deer season.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the biggest changes that we're seeing across the largest area of the state, that's mainly encompassing the Piedmont and Ridge and Valley region, the northwest region of the state, we saw us reverting back to a either sex all season long. And it was just really a couple of days down in southeast Georgia that we added. That was just the opening weekend used to be buck only, but now the vast majority of the state, except for the mountains, is either sex all season long, back like it used to be. So that's one of the biggest changes. Another recent change that people are going to see this year on that either sex days map is a slight season extension in 8 counties of Southwest Georgia. We've been doing uh, research down there for about the last 3 years or so, collecting breeding chronology data, basically looking at when the peak breeding dates are for that area. And they are, as we already knew from our previous maps and some of our roadkill data that we have, that I think we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail later. But we wanted to get really definitive data, and that's going in and aging fetuses after the season closes. And we worked with some landowners to get that accomplished and made some adjustments to the season down there.
Okay. And yeah, you mentioned there, of course, rut timing. Um, we recently shared an article on our website about rut dates for Georgia that was based on data that provided by you guys, the DNR.
Mhm.
And as you would expect, we got our fair share of criticism and readers who were quick to point out that information wasn't necessarily correct for where they hunted or where they lived. So, can you speak on that first? First, I guess, where does that data come from? And then, can you talk a little bit about maybe why hunters might see something a little different in a specific area where they hunt?
Right. Yeah. So our uh, our rut map that we put on our website, I'm not sure if that's the one you used or the one that GON uses, but the one we have on our website is actually based on peaks and deer vehicle collisions. We did a research project a number of years ago where we kind of spot checked that in a number of counties where we had the actual breeding data, the fetal aging data that I mentioned. That's kind of the gold standard for pinpointing conception dates. So we compared it against that, as well as areas that had GPS collared deer where we could look at actual peaks and buck movement rates. So we validated the technique because we had a good data set of those deer vehicle collisions and the peaks in every county. As we didn't have that widespread information for deer in every single county, so we're using that those peak vehicle collisions as a surrogate for the rut. So, where you might see some differences are areas that maybe have a low human population and not a lot of vehicles on the road, or not a lot of road miles, and sample sizes may be kind of low in those areas and may not be as accurate. Another reason why you might see a difference is rut timing doesn't follow county lines. So it's the way we collect data, but not necessarily the way that it exists out on the landscape. And I can tell you from when we did this work recently here in Southwest Georgia, we had deer breeding in late November or even mid-November and in one side of a county, and then in late December or early January on the other side of the county. So there can be some pretty vast differences even from one side of the county to the other, and they're just you have a transitional zone from areas that have a much later rut versus an earlier rut, and we see it most distinctly across the Georgia Alabama border. And a lot of that really relates back to the stocking sources for those deer. There's some kind of genetic programming that helps time that rut for those different populations of deer.
Yeah, 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 and I mean those dates are just averages across the county anyway. So I mean, you might even even within a property, you can see some fluctuation of that. I would assume. So
Well, yeah, and you've got all kinds of other wonky stuff that you get sometimes on in good healthy populations. You'll have fawns coming into heat their first year, and so they usually need to be about 8 or 9 months old. So that's going to be get pushing into January for those. That doesn't necessarily mean that your peak is then, but when you collect a lot of fetal data from a big enough area, what you'll see is it's not uncommon to have a 2 month span from, well, I would say month and a half or more on average, but month and a half up to 2 months spread from the first doe bred to the last doe, and that when we're down here in the South where we are, um, that peak rut week maybe 30% of all the does will be bred during that peak week, and the rest of them are going to get they'll be more scattered out across that month long period, but that week is only about 30% of them that come in. So it's a
yeah,
lot it's a lot looser down here and not as defined as some of the northern states that didn't have like this mixing of deer from all over the country coming into one place.
yeah.
So
Yeah, man, that really I haven't heard that figure before, but that really puts it in perspective. Yeah, even during the peak, you're talking less than half of the deer being bred during that peak time. So yeah, you
and
just
even that
certainly
could vary from property to property.
yeah,
I'm just going off of the data sets that I'm familiar with that we've collected here in Georgia, and that's what I see.
right, gotcha. Well, going back to last season, how was the overall deer harvest for last season, and kind of how did that compare, I guess, to years past?
Yeah, so we killed about 270,000 deer, which is pretty stable ever since we started the Game Check harvest reporting system in 2016. We've had a relatively stable harvest between 250 and 300,000 deer every year, which is good. And it's let's see, that was about 110,000 bucks, and the remainder was does on that breakdown, which is pretty typical for us. Um, we used to kill a little bit more of a 50-50 ratio back when we had either sex all season, so I expect that number to even back out as we get towards that. So
And so I guess with you or with the state kind of returning back to those, a lot of the counties being open for doe harvest the entire season, I guess you've kind of accomplished what you wanted to accomplish with those limited doe days. Or are we kind of back to where we can handle, I guess, season long doe harvest?
yeah, we can definitely or could stand some increased doe harvest. Our goal from our last deer management plan for those regions was to slightly increase and then stabilize those populations. We hit the slightly increase, and now we've got to stabilize what we've got, so we don't continue to see increases. It's a delicate balancing act between trying to maintain everything from hunter satisfaction to deer vehicle collisions to crop damage to other types of abundance issues. So trying to strike a balance between those things is extremely difficult, and usually you're never going to make everybody happy.
Oh
So
no, no, that's for sure. So as far as, I guess, on a regional basis, are the deer numbers, how are the deer numbers, I guess, in relation to your objectives? It sounds like for a lot of the state, you're where they want it to be, but I know, like, North Georgia, are we still kind of below where you would like to be as far as deer numbers and deer harvest?
Yeah, North Georgia is really complicated because we have. Here's the thing: we've got private land valleys that is where the bulk of the decent deer habitat is in all of North Georgia, and then you've got the higher elevation Forest Service land that's closed canopy forests, and I mean deer population densities are extremely low because just poor habitat quality. When you don't cut any timber for 40 years, um, it really impacts the fawn survival. There's no fawning cover. We've got a lot of predators up in the mountains. Combining a lot of predators with no fawning cover really creates a complicated issue. So we've got these two, really distinct habitat types occurring all over North Georgia, and our regulations are different on private land versus the forest. But we've allowed a few more doe days up there because those private land populations have gone up dramatically up there. But the population on the Forest Service has not gone up at all. So we're having abundance issues at the lower elevation, too many deer almost at lower elevation, and not enough deer at higher elevation. So it's a really strange circumstance that we've got going on up there. So we still are way more restrictive on the private land in those counties, but because of the Forest Service land. But that Forest Service land, it's 750,000 acres or so, and we still don't even allow doe harvest with archery. So you cannot kill an antlerless deer, period, on Forest Service land. So uh, really complicated management issue. Really one of the most complicated of my career for sure.
Is there any effort to increase the amount of timber management being done on the national forest? Is that moving forward at all? Or
It's moving so slow. I mean, they're making progress here and there. They're getting some projects approved, and I just, I mean, it's just it's such a vast area now that even if you started making major strides and doing several thousand-acre projects, I mean, it would take you decades to catch up. And I just, it's such a slow process to get work done up there. And you just have complicating issues with. I mean, there's not very many timber mills up in the area um, because of the lack of timber work in that area. So it's a very complicated issue. But there's a lot of people that are really working hard and have been working hard, including a lot of NGOs and Forest Service and DNR. I mean, everybody's trying to help, but it's just a slow process that's been really bogged down with kind of some red tape and lawsuits and that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah, just gonna be slow going, I guess, to see numbers increase in that area, deer numbers increase.
Yeah, we've basically done with eliminating antlerless harvest. We've done about all we can do from a regulatory perspective to take the pressure off.
Yeah.
Um, so
What about hunter numbers across the state? Not necessarily in the North Georgia mountains there, but are hunter numbers holding fairly steady over recent years?
yeah, that's one of the things we've been seeing across the country is the decline in the number of hunters, and that's something really in the last 5 to 10 years we haven't really seen much in Georgia. We saw the decreases in the early and mid 2000s, but really more recent years we've been relatively stable when a lot of other states are declining. And I don't really know how what to attribute that to. I don't know if it's the increased population growth in Georgia that's allowing that number to kind of stay steady. Um, I mean, I can tell you that certainly hunters as a percent of the population is declining, but at least our number of licensed sales has been relatively stable. Some of it could be attributed to the extensive, campaigns that we've done with, hunting license renewals and reminders and all of those things are programs that we do to keep hunters engaged. So those may be moving the needle there too.
Yeah. What about on demand on public land? Are you seeing any increases in public land use by deer hunters? I know you often hear the complaints, on social media about seeing more hunters or too many hunters on public lands. I mean, honestly, I have not experienced that. I hunt public land a good bit. Maybe I know 2020 when COVID was in full swing. There seemed to be an uptick, but overall, are we seeing more public land use?
And the metrics that I look at now, I may not be the best one to answer this question because all I'm looking at is the total number of sign-ins that we get across the entire WMA system, and that's been relatively stable. So, that depends on how they structure the hunts on WMAs that could affect the number of people that sign in. If they have more hunts or fewer hunts, that can impact that number. Um, but that's really the only way that I have the data that I look at to see. And when you sum up all those sign-ins across the entire season for all the WMAs collectively, that number is usually um, you know 40 or 50,000 sign-ins across the whole system every year, and it's been that way for quite some time. So pretty stable there.
Yeah. Well, in relation, I guess, to deer hunting regulations, any significant changes on the horizon? Do you foresee any?
No, not really. We're kind of waiting on our next deer management plan, and I really am looking for public input on our future deer population goals for the state. That's what we get out of that very public driven process. I mean, basically, the way we manage deer in Georgia is um, we strive to manage the population for the goals that we want the public to set the goals. We want them to tell us how many deer to manage for, and really those goals are typically like we want more in this area or less in this area or about right in this area. And when I mean the public, I don't mean just hunters. I mean the people that are negatively impacted by deer too, and they have we're uh, although we mostly interact with hunters, we're bound by law to manage wildlife for the benefit of all citizens of the state, and that includes people that may be negatively impacted by deer. So we have to strike that balance, and that's where those goals come from. So that process is coming up, and we'll really ramp it up next year, and we'll be soliciting a lot of public input uh, on that.
Yeah. Along that lines, I guess, just to address a common conspiracy theory, does
Okay.
how how much does insurance companies play into that factoring?
Yeah, man, I've been doing this 17 years, and I can't tell you how many times that I've heard that there's a conspiracy that we're in cahoots with the insurance companies, and I can tell you this. I mean, anything that we've ever done that increased bag limits in the past or increased season length, they are always, on board and supportive of all those kind of things. Um, and but I don't really see them. They've never really changed any regulation or law based on that in my 17 years, based on any pressure from an insurance company or anything like that. Um, So, I've gotten a letter a time or two. An insurance company has sent in a letter when we're writing, regulations like, oh, you should extend the deer season to the end of February and, you know, change the bag limit to unlimited and things like that. But, it's, I've never really gotten. this this kind of pressure from them as a industry
Yeah.
um, for that. And I think, well, I talked to somebody one time, and I don't know if this is true or not, but seems like I recall somebody from an insurance company saying, "Man, this like that kind of almost pales in comparison the stuff from deer vehicle collisions compared to some other payouts that they have." And it was kind of small potatoes or something like that. But
Oh yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
They're not gonna lose money. I mean, they're gonna they don't. If you're hitting deer, they're just gonna increase your premium. So
Right.
they're
Well,
gonna.
I mean, that's how they operate. They've got
Yeah,
to, all everybody's collective premiums have to make enough money to pay for all the payouts and all the damage, plus for the company to thrive and pay its employees.
that's right.
So,
Yep, yep.
um,
They're not gonna lose money. That's for sure.
no, but I honestly I hear more about it on the crop damage side than the deer vehicle collision side.
Yeah,
That's where I hear more grumbling from the insurance side.
gotcha. Well, let's shift gears a little and talk about the Deer Management Assistant Program or DMAP. I know it's been around now for a few years. So how's that program going?
Busting at the seams.
Well, that's good.
With It's been going great. That's one of my career goals that I set out with, to really beef up a good private land steer management assistance program in Georgia, and I've been very fortunate to have helped pull that off. And let's see, I want to say I've only got three biologists currently working on the program, but that's all they do full time is private lands deer management work. We've got over 200,000 acres in the program. That's I don't know between I don't know probably 160 different properties or more. Um, so it's pretty widespread. It's been extremely successful in just that short amount of time. We did a soft rollout in November of 2019, and I think we put one little thing on social media, and we put a mention in the hunting regulations, and like we've done no other advertising, and we're kind of at capacity almost for for what three biologists can handle. So
Yeah.
just the word of mouth has made it really popular. So,
Well, good.
um,
I
but
guess,
yeah, it's been great.
yeah, for those not familiar, what does the program entail?
Yeah, so the primary function of the program is for the public, whether it be a private landowner with 100 acres or a hunt club on several thousand acres with a bunch of members, is to have access to a biologist that can come out and learn the property, uh, help uh, help you figure out what your management goals are for the property, and then write out a plan that helps you achieve those goals, help set you up with population monitoring, data collection, and then writing annual harvest recommendations. So how many does you need to kill off of each given property? That's I saw hunt clubs for years over harvesting deer, and they had no idea they were doing it because they just didn't have somebody that could show them, hey, you've got, you know, yeah, you're only killing one or two deer per hunter, but you got way too many hunters on here, and you're over harvesting this population, and they were blaming it on coyotes when it's or something like that, but it's really this, you know, just too many hunters on a smaller tract of land. So it's providing that technical guidance to people on private lands. And then another benefit of the program is some properties are chronically overabundant with deer. So we have the ability to issue, based on the data that's collected on that property, we can issue site specific harvest recommendations with harvest flexibility. So if we come to a property and they've got just an excessive number of deer and it's a low number of hunters, we can actually issue deer tags to that property to meet that harvest goal for that year. So it gives us a lot of flexibility so we can set regulations to what's appropriate for an entire region in the state or an entire county or group of counties. But then if we've got an exception to that rule, we don't have to make that county regulation fit that one property. We can make the site specific regulations fit that property
Yeah.
in terms of harvest. So it's extremely beneficial and gives us a lot of flexibility, both at the property level and from a regulatory perspective. We don't have to consider those exceptions to the rule when we set those regulations. So before, if we needed to reduce harvest, but this one property's busting at the seams, we just say, sorry, we gotta limit your doe days. I know you already had trouble killing enough does to begin with, but we're going to make it even harder. But there's nothing we can do because the rest of the region needs that reduction. And now we don't have to do that.
And is there any cost to get involved in that, or?
Yes, we do charge a fee for the program, and it depends on what level. You can find out information about it at georgiawildlife.com/DMAP, DMAP. And that gives you the level, the different costs for each level. The higher the level and the higher amount of work that we have to invest in it, we charge a little bit more. But advice, is always free. You can always email or call any of the DMAP biologists and, hey, how old is this deer? What do you think of this? And, what should I plant in my food plots or any of that? Really, anybody with DNR, any biologist or technicians for that matter. I mean, but we're all available for that.
Yeah. Well, now let's kind of wrap up, I guess, by diving into a topic that nobody really likes to discuss, but it's important nonetheless, and that's some deer disease issues. And I guess we can touch on EHD and CWD a little bit. Starting with EHD, or epizootic hemorrhagic disease. Can you talk a little bit about what it is, and have you seen much of it this summer?
Okay. Yeah. So EHD is a seasonal disease, viral disease that we see in deer. It's caused by a couple of different viruses, blue tongue virus and EHD virus. It's transmitted by little biting midges called like no-see-ums, those things that aggravate you on the
Oh yeah.
coast, especially. Um, been here for years, probably predates European settlement in the deep south, especially. We have a lot of no-see-ums, so we see the disease pretty frequently, and that's one of the reasons why we don't lose a lot of deer to it. We have pretty high herd immunity, but we do still track it. It's probably the disease that kills more. It is the disease that kills more deer in the state than any other disease on an annual basis. But typically shows up late summer, early fall. Right about now is when you're starting to see it. Finding deer dead in or near a water source, a pond, stream, lake. Very good indication if it's this time of year that's hemorrhagic disease. They're essentially hemorrhaging out, bleeding out internally, makes them dehydrated or feel dehydrated, and they go to water and end up dying there. Pretty we still to be seen, but pretty standard year for us. And just to give you perspective, we don't get every single deer reported for it, obviously, but an average deer might be 25 to 40 known reports of dead deer. And I think the worst year I ever saw was 380. That was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. Now that's across the entire state. Other states in the north that get hit sporadically, they would be thousands and thousands of deer, like shutting down temporarily deer season or dramatically limiting harvest in certain areas and those kind of things that we are really fortunate to not have to do down here.
Yeah. Now, if a hunter finds or anybody for that matter finds a dead deer near water, is that something they need to to report to you guys, or
Yes.
okay?
Yes, we want to. I mean, people finding sick and dead deer is one of our primary disease surveillance tools. So if you see a deer that's something wrong with it, let us know. That's how we track it. We'll make a determination if we need to actually it may be anything from, I see a lot of tumors. Those are usually, they're not transmissible issues. So there's really nothing to be done. But, if any deer that might have a symptom consistent with CWD, I want to try to get a sample from it if I can. And then sometimes we'll try to even get the whole carcass into the lab for necropsy and see what's going on with it. It just depends on the logistics and what we think may be going on with it. But we want to know about it for sure, and so we can at least make a determination what to do given the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you mentioned CWD there. I guess could you go ahead and talk about that chronic wasting disease, kind of what it is, and why Georgia hunters should be concerned about it?
Yes. So chronic wasting disease, it's marching across the country, and it's got us surrounded on nearly all sides. So Um, the only holdouts now are South Carolina. Well, just us in South Carolina now that Florida got their first positive. But the new case in Florida is by far the closest to us at around 35 to 40 miles from our border. Um, I have heard that they've done some additional sampling and have not found any more positives. So we don't really yet know exactly, how big that outbreak is going to be. Uh, really, probably won't know for a couple more years as they do more sampling. Um, but it's something we've been getting prepared for it for literally decades now. Just trying to get a handle on it. We've been doing some of our own research. We've been doing some survey work with taxidermists and processors to see how we can work with them. Not only right now as we're doing initial surveillance for it, but if and when we find our first positive, also working with them to help with those, not only the sampling efforts, but getting deer processed and ready for transport and those kind of things.
Yeah. What can we as hunters do, I guess, to help with the efforts to prevent its spread?
Yeah, so the two main things that are going to help prevent us from getting it into Georgia by way of humans is number one, don't bring a live deer across the state line. It's very illegal, and for good reason. That's the number one way, easiest way for chronic wasting disease to get introduced into a new area. And the second behind that is carcass transport restrictions. Last year was the first season where we had a complete ban on bringing whole carcasses or whole heads from outside of the state, regardless of what state. Prior to that, it was only CWD positive states, but we went ahead and made it all states now. So you can only bring in, skull caps, hides, caped out hides, and boned out meat. We're trying to reduce the waste that somebody might inadvertently discard onto the landscape that could have prions in it and transmit it to other deer. That's the reason behind those carcass transports. So those two things are mainly for the ways to keep it out of Georgia. Um, and let's see. Um, and another good practice, really, if you're in the state, is just it's really a good practice to not move and discard carcass parts anywhere because in a lot of states they've had CWD for a number of years before they first detected it. And if we got in the habit of not moving carcass parts around, if you gut a deer, gut it where it falls. Don't take it back home in the back of the truck and on another county over and then dump the gut pile on the back 40 there. So just being mindful of that and not moving stuff around the landscape and potentially introducing any kind of disease into new areas. So, leave it where you got it, or if you can't do that, bag it up and send it to a landfill to make sure it's, you know, really well disposed of where deer can't access it.
Gotcha. Yep, definitely not something we want. I know it's knocking on the door, but hopefully we can hold it off as long as we can.
Yeah, we've been really focused on prevention, and it with the new positive in Florida. Eventually, hopefully, it's still decades away, but eventually, it will make its way here, um, and we're going to be prepared for it. But it's not going to be the end of deer hunting.
Right.
Um, it's a terrible disease, but you know we're gonna do everything we can to make sure that it's managed and that um, hunting is maintained in a sustainable fashion wherever it exists. So um, that's the main goal, and it can be done. It's been done in a lot of states if you keep up with the targeted removals that are required to kind of manage the disease. You can keep that prevalence low and for a long period of time if you maintain the effort.
Yep.
So
Well, good deal. Well, Charlie, I told you I'd try to keep it to around 30 minutes, and we quickly got there. So I really appreciate your time and willingness to come on here and talk to us about deer hunting and deer management. And yeah, just enjoyed it as always.
yeah, thanks for having me on. It's not hard to fill 30 or 40 minutes on a topic. So
No, not when it comes to talking deer. It goes by
yeah, for
quick.
sure. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and wish everybody out there a great deer season. And if you're climbing a tree, I always like to say, make sure you got that harness on and make sure you're tethered to something secure, because that's our
Absolutely.
number one most dangerous thing is falling out of a tree stand.
Absolutely. Yeah. It ain't worth losing your life or your mobility over a deer hunt for sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man.